In the 41st millennium, there is only war. For 10,000 years, the Imperium of Man has endured against Xenos horrors, demonic incursions, and heretical rebellions. Its armies number in the trillions. Its faith is absolute. Its emperor sits entombed upon the golden throne, a corpse god whose psychic might holds reality together. The Imperium has faced every conceivable threat and survived. But it has never faced Kratos. The world of Vandros Prime was a fortress planet, its surface covered in defensive batteries and trench networks that stretched across continents. 30 million Imperial Guard held the line against an Orc War that had been battering its defenses for 2 years. The war was brutal, grinding, endless. Exactly the kind of conflict the Imperium excelled at. Victory was measured in decades, not days. Then the sky tore open. Not a warp rift, not a webway portal, something else entirely. A wound in reality that bled colors that had no name, that screamed with the death cries of gods long forgotten. It lasted 3 seconds. When it closed, something fell from the black. He hit the surface of Vandros Prime like a meteor, cratering the Earth with the force of an orbital bombardment. The impact sent a shockwave across 50 kilometers, collapsing trenches and flattening defensive towers. Seismic sensors registered it as a magnitude 9 earthquake. Soldiers on both sides, Imperial and Orc, stopped fighting and turned to stare at the pillar of dust rising from the impact site. In the crater, Kratos rose to his feet. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his skin pale as death, marked with red tattoos that seemed to absorb light. His body was a roadmap of scars, each one a story of violence survived, of gods slain, of realms conquered. The blades of chaos hung from chains wrapped around his forearms, their edges still flickering with hellfire from whatever realm he'd just escaped. The Leviathan axe was mag-locked to his back, frost crystals forming in the air around it. He looked up at the sky, a toxic yellow-gray choked with industrial smoke, and his expression never changed. No confusion, no fear, just the cold assessment of a warrior who had fought his way through Hades, Olympus, Helheim, and Asgard. Another world, another war, another obstacle between him and rest. "By the throne!" The shout came from a ridge 300 meters away. A squad of Cadian shock troops had been advancing through the trenches when the impact occurred. Now they stared down at the figure in the crater, lasguns raised, training overriding terror. Sergeant Callus triggered his Voxcaster. "Command, this is Wrath 7 Actual. We have contact. Unknown combatant at impact site. Requesting identification and..." Kratos started walking. Not toward them, not away. He simply chose a direction and moved, his stride purposeful, unstoppable. The earth trembled with each step. "Halt!" Callus bellowed, his voice amplified by his rebreather. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself or be destroyed." Kratos didn't even look at them. Callus felt ice in his stomach. He'd fought orcs, chaos cultists, even a tyrannid swarm once. He knew what fear tasted like, but this was different. The figure below wasn't charging, wasn't threatening. He was ignoring them, completely, as if 30 armed soldiers meant nothing. "Fire!" Callus roared. 30 lasguns opened up simultaneously. Lasbolts, beams of concentrated light hot enough to boil flesh, stitched across Kratos' back. The air filled with the distinctive crack, hiss of lasfire.
Kratos kept walking. The las bolts left black scorch marks on his skin that faded within seconds, his divine regeneration treating the wounds as insect bites. "Heavier weapons!" Callus screamed, panic bleeding into his voice. A guardsman with a plasma gun stepped forward, the weapon whining as it charged. He fired. The superheated bolt of star matter shrieked through the air and struck Kratos in the shoulder, the impact enough to vaporize a space marine. Kratos staggered one step. Smoke rose from his shoulder, where layers of skin had been flash-burned. He stopped walking. Then he turned his head and looked directly at them. His eyes were empty, not cruel, not angry, just empty. The gaze of someone who had killed so many that individual lives had lost meaning. "Fall back," Callus whispered. Then louder, "Fall back! Retreat! Retreat!" The Cadians broke and ran, discipline shattering in the face of something their training had never prepared them for. Kratos watched them flee. He didn't pursue. After a moment, he simply turned and continued walking in his original direction. By nightfall, Vox chatter across Vandross Prime had reached fever pitch. Fragmentary reports came in from multiple sectors. Walked through a minefield, explosions didn't even slow him. Entire platoon opened fire. He didn't fight back, just kept moving. Tried to block his path with a Lehman Russ. He pushed it aside, pushed a 60-ton tank aside. In the planetary command center, Lord General Thaddeus Karn stood before a hololith, displaying the stranger's path. It was a perfectly straight line cutting across the continent, heedless of terrain, enemy positions, or imperial fortifications. "What is he moving toward?" Karn demanded. "Unknown, my lord," said his aide, "but he's passed through 17 defensive lines without deviation. Casualties are minimal. He only retaliates when directly attacked, and even then with restraint." Restraint? Karn's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on the casualty reports. 17 dead, all from one squad that had attempted to stop him with melta charges. The stranger had torn through them in seconds, then continued walking as if nothing had happened. "Get me the astropaths," Karn ordered. "Send a message to Segmentum Command, Priority Omega, and tell them we have a potential Xenos incursion unlike anything in the archives, and tell them..." The Vox erupted with panicked screaming. "Contact! Contact! Contact! He's here! He just walked through the perimeter! Bolter fire ineffective. Throne preserve us. He's not even bleeding. Send reinforcements to Bastion 12. We need space marines. We need..." The transmission cut to static. Karn felt sweat bead on his forehead despite the climate controls. What was it, Bastion 12? His aide checked the cogitator. His face went pale. "The central astropathic relay, my lord. He's heading straight for it." Understanding hit Karn like a bolter round. He knows. Throne damn us all. He knows we're trying to call for help. 10 minutes later, the astropathic relay went dark. 37 guardsmen died defending it. The stranger walked out carrying nothing, having destroyed the relay's machinery with his bare hands, and resumed his original path. He wasn't trying to conquer, wasn't trying to kill. He was trying to leave, and he was eliminating anything that might stop him.
On the third day, the Inquisition arrived. The black ship Penitent Scourge broke through the orbital defenses, its hull bristling with weapons and sacred wards. Inquisitor Lord Cassius Vex stood on the bridge, his power armor decorated with purity seals and the bones of heretics. Behind him stood a retinue of 20 Astartes, Grey Knights, the Imperium's demon hunters, their armor inscribed with anti-warp hexagrammic wards. "Show me," Vex commanded. The hololith displayed the stranger's path. Still a perfect line, still moving, now approaching the planetary capital. 3 days of uninterrupted movement, said Brother Captain Arvan of the Grey Knights, his voice synthesized through his helmet. No rest, no food, no deviation. Whatever this is, it's not human. I can see that, Vex said coldly. He'd fought daemons for 60 years. He knew inhuman when he saw it. But something about this bothered him. Daemons don't behave this way. They corrupt, they destroy, they revel in slaughter. This is something else. He zoomed in on the casualty reports. The stranger only killed when attacked. When left alone, he passed through Imperial lines like a ghost, unstoppable, but not actively hostile. It's trying to leave, Vex realized. It doesn't want to be here. Then we should let it go, Arvan said. Vex's head snapped toward the Grey Knight. Let it go, Brother Captain? That thing has walked through firepower that would stop a daemon prince. It's making a mockery of the Imperial Guard. If we let it walk away, what message does that send? That the Imperium can be ignored? That we are powerless? Arvan's head turned toward him. Behind the lenses, the Grey Knight's eyes were ancient, tired. Inquisitor, I have fought the demonic for 2 centuries. I know when we face a threat that must be destroyed. I know when we face something that will destroy us if we press the issue. That thing down there, it has killed gods, Inquisitor. I can feel it in my bones. The warp recoils from it. Then you're afraid, Vex said flatly. Yes, Arvan admitted without shame. And if you were wise, you would be too. Vex studied the Grey Knight for a long moment. Then he turned back to the hololith. Prepare a drop pod assault. Full retinue. We go in force and we bring it down. The Emperor protects, Brother Captain. But he also demands we protect his realm. Arvan said nothing, but his hand drifted to his nemesis force sword, and he began cycling through prayers of sanctification. They would need them.
He'd been walking for 3 days, crossing mountains, swamps, and ruins without pause. This world was sick, choking on its own industry, its sky forever darkened by smoke. It reminded him of places he'd destroyed before, realms so consumed by their own ambition that they'd forgotten they were built on suffering. He felt no pity for it. But now, something was descending, something that registered to his divine senses as power. Not warp taint like the screaming voices that occasionally clawed at the edge of his awareness, but organized, concentrated, militant power. He stopped walking for the first time in 3 days. 8 drop pods screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars. They hit the ground in a perfect octagon around him, their retro thrusters firing at the last second to arrest their descent. The doors blew off with explosive charges. 20 warriors in silver armor emerged, each one over 7 feet tall, their armor crackling with psychic energy. They moved with inhuman precision, spreading into a firing line, bolters raised. Inquisitor Vex descended last, his personal drop pod landing directly in front of Kratos. He stepped out, his plasma pistol holstered, his force staff crackling with purple lightning. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind," Vex intoned, his voice amplified across the empty plain. "You are hereby detained for questioning. Surrender or face his wrath." Kratos looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since arriving on this world, he spoke. His voice was gravel and iron, the sound of continents shifting. "I have heard those words before, from Zeus, from Odin, from every god who thought themselves absolute." He unclasped the Leviathan axe from his back. Frost spread across the ground beneath his feet. "They all learned the same lesson." Vex, his augmatic eye focused on the weapon. Ancient, impossibly crafted, radiating power that had nothing to do with the warp. "You claim to be a god-slayer?" Vex asked carefully. "No," Kratos said. "I do not claim." He raised the axe. "I simply am." The Grey Knights opened fire. The bolter fire was deafening. 20 Grey Knights unleashed a synchronized volley, each bolt a self-propelled explosive round designed to detonate inside the target's body. The rounds were blessed, inscribed with wards against demonic corruption, each one a prayer made manifest in steel and fire. Against Chaos Space Marines, they were devastating. Against daemons, they were annihilation. Against Kratos, they were an insult. He moved, not with the enhanced speed of an Astartes, but with the fluid economy of someone who had fought for millennia. The Leviathan axe swept in a horizontal arc, the frost magic expanding into a wave of absolute zero that froze 20 bolts mid-flight. They dropped to the ground like metallic hail, their propellant solidified, their detonators locked in ice. Then Kratos threw the axe. It spun through the air with a sound like a winter storm, trailing crystalline frost. It struck the nearest Grey Knight in the chest, punching through ceramite armor that could withstand anti-tank rounds, through the black carapace beneath, through fused ribs and secondary heart, and out his back in an explosion of frozen blood. The Grey Knight fell without a sound. The axe continued through 2 more Astartes before Kratos raised his hand. The weapon stopped mid-air, reversed direction, and flew back to his grip as if pulled by invisible strings. Ice particles glittered in its wake. 3 Grey Knights down in 2 seconds. "Spread out!" Brother Captain Arvin roared. "Psychic assault protocol!" The remaining 17 Grey Knights scattered, their movements synchronized despite the chaos. 5 dropped to one knee, their eyes glowing with psychic fire. They reached into the warp, pulling at the Immaterium's terrible power, shaping it into spears of pure thought aimed at Kratos' mind. The psychic assault hit him like a tidal wave. Visions of damnation, hallucinations of failure, memories weaponized and turned against him. They showed him his wife, Lysandra, burning, his daughter, Calliope, screaming, his son, Atreus, dying. Every loss, every failure, every moment of weakness magnified and thrust into his consciousness. Kratos grunted. Then he took a step forward. The Grey Knights stared in disbelief. Their psychic assault, enough to lobotomize a hive tyrant or reduce a greater daemon to gibbering madness, had barely slowed him. "Impossible," one of them whispered. Kratos' eyes met theirs, and they saw something that made their psychically enhanced minds recoil. Emptiness. Not the emptiness of the void, but the emptiness of someone who had already endured every torment, carried every guilt, and walked out of literal hell. "I have been to the depths of Tartarus," Kratos said, his voice cutting through the psychic screaming. "I have carried the weight of the heavens. I have drowned in the river Styx and climbed back out. Your illusions are children's nightmares compared to what I have lived." The psychic assault shattered like glass. Kratos was among them before they could react. The blades of chaos uncoiled from his arms, their chains screaming as they extended. Hellfire, true hellfire, forged in the depths of Hades, wrapped around the blades. He spun, and the chains became a wheel of flame. A Grey Knight raised his storm shield. The blade struck it, and the blessed metal cracked. Hellfire ate through the ceramite like acid through flesh. The knight staggered back, his shield arm hanging useless, ceramite melting and fusing with flesh beneath.
Kratos reversed the spin. The second blade caught another knight across the helmet, shearing through the psychically reinforced metal and the skull beneath. The Astartes' enhanced physiology tried to compensate. His third lung kicked in, his Laraman cells rushed to seal the wound. But there was nothing to seal. The top of his head was simply gone. Inquisitor Vex watched in horror as his finest warriors, each one a legend, each one worth 100 normal Astartes, were being dismantled by a single combatant. "Fall back to secondary positions," Arvon commanded, his voice steady despite the carnage. The Grey Knights were retreating in good order, laying down suppressing fire. But Kratos was relentless. He didn't pursue with bloodlust or fury. He simply advanced, methodical, inevitable. Vex raised his force staff and channeled every ounce of his psychic might into a single, concentrated bolt of warp lightning. It screamed through the air, reality warping around it, and struck Kratos square in the chest. The ghost of Sparta slid backward 3 meters, boots carving furrows in the earth. Smoke rose from the impact point. He looked down at the scorch mark on his chest, then up at Vex, and he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Better," Kratos acknowledged. Then he charged. Vex had faced daemon princes. He'd dueled chaos sorcerers. He'd survived the assassination attempt of a Calidus assassin. But nothing had prepared him for this. Kratos moved like a dreadnought with the speed of an eversaur, his axe and blades weaving a pattern of death that was simultaneously brutal and elegant. Vex parried with his force staff, psychic energy flaring. The Leviathan axe hit the staff with enough force to crack the psychically reinforced adamantium. Frost spread up the weapon towards Vex's hands. Kratos pulled the axe back and drove his fist forward. The punch hit Vex's refractor field, a personal force field that could stop a bolter round at point-blank range. The field shattered like glass. The fist continued through and connected with Vex's breastplate. The Inquisitor flew backward 30 meters, his armor crumpled, ribs broken, one lung collapsed. He hit the ground hard enough to crater it and lay there gasping, his body's augmetic screaming warnings about internal damage.
Through blurred vision, he watched Kratos turn back to the Grey Knights. 8 remained standing. They had formed a defensive circle, their nemesis force swords blazing with psychic fire, their bolters empty, their armor battered. Brother Captain Arvon stepped forward, removing his helmet. His face was scarred, ancient beyond his apparent years, and his eyes held the weight of 2 centuries fighting the demoniac. You are no demon, no Xenos, no corruption of the warp. You are something else, something older. Kratos said nothing. I have fought the enemies of mankind for 200 years. I have banished demon princes and cleansed worlds. I know when I face something that threatens the Imperium. He raised his sword. But I also know when I face something that could end us. And you are an extinction event wrapped in flesh. Then stand aside, Kratos said. I cannot, not because of duty, not because of honor, but because if I let you walk away and you turn your wrath upon the Imperium, how many worlds will burn before we stop you? How many billions will die?
Kratos' expression didn't change. That depends entirely on whether your Imperium continues to stand in my way. Then we are at an impasse. No, Kratos said flatly. We are not. He moved. Arvon's psychically enhanced reflexes gave him a fraction of a second warning. He brought his Nemesis Force sword up in a perfect parry, channeling 2 centuries of blade work into a single defensive form. The Leviathan axe met the sword with a sound like a bell tolling. The sword shattered. Arvon stared at the broken blade in his hand, a weapon that had survived battles against greater daemons, that had been forged in sacred fires and blessed by the Emperor himself, now reduced to slag. Kratos' second strike took him in the chest. The axe bit deep, frost spreading through Arvon's armor, flash freezing blood and organs. The Grey Knight fell to his knees, frost forming across his face. You are worse than daemons, Arvon gasped, blood on his lips freezing as it emerged. Daemons can be banished. Daemons have weaknesses. You... His eyes were already glazing over. What do you want? To go home, Kratos said simply. Then why fight us? Because you attacked me first. Arvon's eyes widened with a terrible realization in his final moment. They had created this daddle. The Imperium's pride, its refusal to show weakness, its absolute certainty that it could contain any threat. They had forced this confrontation. He died with that knowledge. The remaining 7 Grey Knights broke formation and charged as one, knowing they would die, but unable to retreat while their captain's body still steamed in the cold air. Kratos killed them all in 40 seconds. Inquisitor Vex woke in a Medike bay 3 days later. His body was a mass of surgical scars, augmetic repairs, and pain suppressors. A servo skull hovered nearby, monitoring his vitals. Through the viewport, he could see the penitent scourge in high orbit above Vandros Prime. "You're awake." The voice belonged to Inquisitor Thessala, a colleague from the Ordo Xenos. She stood by his bedside, her face carefully neutral. "The stranger?" Vex croaked through a throat dry as ash. Still moving, still following the same trajectory. Thessala brought up a hololith. The line had extended another 300 kilometers. He's approaching the northern pole. Intelligence suggests there may be some kind of resonance there, a thin point in reality, perhaps. We believe he's trying to reach it. "To leave," Vex said. "Yes." "How many?" Thessala was silent for a moment. 20 Grey Knights, 147 Imperial Guard who attempted to stop him, 3 Lemon Rust tanks,
One Bane blade super heavy that tried to block his path, he tore through its armor plating with his bare hands and ripped out the engine core. Vex closed his eyes. Throne preserve us. It gets worse, Thessala's voice dropped. He passed through Hive Secundus 6 hours ago. 2 million souls. He could have slaughtered them all. They were completely defenseless. Panic had shut down the Hive's defenders, but he didn't. He walked straight through the main arterial, and anyone who didn't attack him, he ignored. What are you saying?
I'm saying he's not a monster, Cassius. He's not Chaos. He's not Xenos. He's something else. And I think if we leave him alone, he'll leave us alone. Vex's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on her. You're suggesting we let him go? I'm suggesting that we've already lost 24 of the Emperor's finest warriors trying to stop him, and all we've accomplished is making him angry. He's not trying to conquer. He's not trying to corrupt. He wants to leave, and we keep putting obstacles in his path. Thessala leaned closer. How many more will die for our pride, Cassius? Before Vex could respond, the ship's Vox system crackled to life. Alert! Warp signature detected! Multiple contacts emerging from the Immaterium! Thessala's face went pale. She triggered her wrist-mounted hololith. 7 red icons appeared in orbit above Vandros Prime. Chaos warships, their hulls corrupted and wrong, dripping ichor into the void. No, not now, not here. The lead ship was broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that emerged was like razors scraping across reality. Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. We have come for the warrior who walks. The skull of a Godslayer will please Khorne Eternal. Vex struggled to sit up, pain shooting through his broken body. They sensed him. Throne, damn it all. Chaos sensed him. On the planet's surface, Kratos stopped walking. He looked up at the sky as 7 warships entered low orbit, their weapon batteries charging, their drop pods preparing to launch. And for the first time since arriving on this world, the ghost of Sparta's expression changed. His lips pulled back in something that might have been a snarl. The blades of chaos ignited, hellfire roaring along their length. Finally, Kratos said to the empty air, enemies worth killing. The Chaos warships descended like falling cathedrals of brass and bone. Their hulls were no longer metal, but living tissue fused with demonic architecture. Gun decks that breathed, armor plating that bled, engineerium cores that beat like hearts. The largest vessel, the Throne of Skulls, was a corrupted battle barge 3 kilometers long, its prow shaped like a roaring daemon's maw. Aboard the bridge, Karn the Betrayer stood in silence. He was ancient beyond measure, his body more scar tissue and bionics than flesh, his armor the deep crimson of dried blood. Gorechild, his chain axe, idled in his grip, its teeth hungry. Behind him, 200 World Eater's berserkers stood in ranks, each one a howling engine of violence, barely restrained by discipline that had long since rotted into ritual. But Karn was not howling. He was watching the hololith with something approaching reverence. "Show me again," he commanded. The picked feed replayed. Kratos tearing through the Grey Knights, the methodical brutality, the economy of violence, the absolute absence of wasted motion. It was beautiful in the way a collapsing star was beautiful, terrible, inevitable, pure. "He killed 20 Grey Knights in minutes," said the Chaos Lord beside him, a berserker named Skarvash, whose armor was decorated with the skulls of space marines. The Emperor's daemon hunters, the ones even we avoid in open battle. He killed them like children. "Yes," Karn agreed,
quietly. Khorne thirsts for his skull. Yes. Then why do you hesitate, betrayer? Karn turned to look at Scarvash. Behind his helmet's lenses, his eyes were lucid, a rarity for one who had served the Blood God for 10,000 years. I have fought since the Horus heresy. I have killed loyalists and traitors, Xenos and daemons. I have bathed in blood across 1,000 worlds. He looked back at the hololith, and I have never seen anyone fight like that. He is just one warrior. No, Karn's voice was certain. We is what we pretend to be. We scream and rage and lose ourselves in the red path. We become beasts wearing the skins of Astartes. He gestured to the frozen image of Kratos standing amid the corpses of Grey Knights. He is utterly calm, utterly focused. He kills because he must, not because he craves it. That is true mastery of violence.
Then he will be a worthy offering. Karn said nothing for a long moment. Then, prepare all forces for planetfall. But mark this, anyone who attacks without my command will answer to Gorechild. I want to face him myself first. I want to understand what he is before we drag him before the Skull Throne. The World Eaters roared their approval, chain axes revving in anticipation. Below, on Vandros Prime's surface, Kratos watched the Chaos drop pods begin their descent, hundreds of them, falling like bloody rain. The first wave hit the ground in a half-circle, 2 kilometers from Kratos' position. The drop pod's doors blew off with explosive charges, and World Eater's berserkers poured out, their armor crimson and brass, their weapons already screaming for blood. But they didn't charge. They formed a perimeter, chain axes idling, bolters lowered, waiting. Kratos' eyes narrowed. These warriors were different from the silver-armored soldiers he'd fought. Those had been disciplined, organized, reluctant. These radiated bloodlust so thick he could taste it on the air. But they weren't attacking. Someone was controlling them. The final drop pod landed directly between the 2 forces. The door opened, and Karn the Betrayer stepped out. He was shorter than the other warriors, barely taller than a normal human, but he moved with absolute confidence. His armor was ancient, pre-heresy Mark V plate, repaired 10,000 times, every surface covered in kill markings and brass icons. Gorechild hung in his grip, its chain axe teeth still. He walked forward alone until he stood 50 meters from Kratos. Then he stopped and removed his helmet. His face was scarred beyond recognition, one eye replaced with a bionic lens, his jaw reconstructed with crude augmetics. But his remaining natural eye held intelligence, cold, calculating, utterly focused. "You are the one who killed the Grey Knights," Karn said. His voice was surprisingly calm, almost conversational. Kratos said nothing. "I am Karn, servant of Khorne, the Blood God. For 10,000 years I have walked the path of slaughter. I have killed more beings than most worlds have ever birthed. I have offered rivers of skulls to the throne." He paused. And in all that time, I have never seen anyone fight the way you do." "Then you have lived a sheltered life," Kratos replied flatly. Karn laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Perhaps. The Imperium calls you a threat. The Inquisition tried to capture you. But I see something else." He hefted Gorechild. "I see a warrior who understands violence as an art form, who kills without rage, without passion, without hate, just necessity."
Is there a point to this? My God wants your skull. He has commanded me to take it. Khan's expression didn't change. But before I try, I want to know, what are you? You're not human, not Astartes, not demon. What manner of being walks through an Imperium world like it doesn't exist and slaughters the Emperor's finest warriors without breaking stride? Kratos considered the question. Then, surprisingly, he answered, "I was a Spartan warrior, a general, a father. The gods of my world demanded worship, demanded sacrifice, demanded obedience, so I killed them, all of them. Ares, Zeus, Odin, Thor, every god who claimed dominion over mortals, I ended them." Khan was silent for a moment. "You killed gods. Yes. And now you find yourself in a realm ruled by a corpse god worshipped by trillions, a galaxy where gods made of emotion and belief feast on souls, a universe where faith has power and worship shapes reality." Khan's eye gleamed. "Tell me, does that make you angry? Does it make you want to tear it all down?" "No, I just want to leave." Khan stared at him. Then he laughed again, longer this time. "Of course you do. You're not interested in our wars, our gods, our ideologies. You just want to go home." He shook his head. "I almost respect that. Almost." He raised Gorechild, and the chain axe roared to life. Behind him, 200 world eaters began howling, chain axes revving in unison, the sound building into a mechanical scream. Kratos raised the Leviathan axe. "Then come," he said simply. Karn charged. The betrayer moved with speed that should have been impossible for someone in full power armor. He closed 50 meters in seconds, Gorechild swinging in a horizontal arc designed to bisect Kratos at the waist. Kratos brought the axe down to block. The weapons met with a sound like a forge exploding. Frost and fire erupted from the impact point. Khan's armor sparked as ice crystals formed across the ceramite. Kratos slid backward 3 meters, boots carving trenches in the earth.
They separated, circling. "Good," Karn said, his voice carrying genuine pleasure. "Very good." He attacked again, this time in a spinning combo, high, low, thrust. Each strike delivered with 10,000 years of experience. Gorechild's teeth screamed as they bit at air where Kratos had been a microsecond before. Kratos ducked under a decapitation strike and drove his fist forward in a palm strike. It connected with Karn's breastplate. The ancient ceramite cracked. Karn flew backward, hit the ground, and rolled to his feet. Blood leaked from his mouth, but he was grinning. Again. The fight became a dance of death. Karn was fast, faster than the Grey Knights, faster than any mortal should be. But Kratos was faster. Karn was skilled, honed by millennia of constant warfare. But Kratos had killed beings who had mastered combat before humanity learned to walk upright. Gorechild carved a gash across Kratos' ribs. The ghost of Sparta grunted, and the wound sealed within seconds. The Leviathan axe caught Karn's shoulder, shattering the pauldron and flash freezing the flesh beneath. Karn roared, not in pain, but in exultation, and tore the frozen flesh off his own shoulder to keep fighting. They clashed again and again, neither giving ground, both warriors pushing themselves to their absolute limits. The watching World Eaters had gone silent. They had never seen anyone match the betrayer blow for blow. Some part of their rage-addled minds recognized they were witnessing something that would become legend. Then Kratos changed tactics. He threw the Leviathan axe. Karn dodged, the weapon spinning past his head by millimeters. He grinned, thinking Kratos had made a mistake. Then the blades of chaos uncoiled. Hellfire screamed through the air. Kratos spun, the chains extending to their full length, creating a wheel of flame that encompassed a 20-meter radius. Karn raised Gorechild to block, but the chains wrapped around the chain axe, hellfire eating through the ancient weapon's haft. Gorechild's chain broke, the teeth stopped spinning. The weapon, Karn's companion for 10,000 years, fell silent. Karn stared at his broken weapon. Then he dropped it. "Yes," he whispered, then louder, "Yes." He drew his plasma pistol and bolt pistol, firing both simultaneously while charging forward. Kratos recalled the Leviathan axe. It flew back to his hand, smashing through Karn's weapons on its return journey, shattering them both. Karn hit Kratos at full sprint, driving his armored shoulder into the Godslayer's chest. They crashed to the ground, Karn on top, his gauntleted fists hammering down like pistons. The punches would have cratered concrete. They bloodied Kratos' face, broke his nose, split his lip. Kratos caught the next punch. His hand closed around Karn's fist. Then he squeezed. Ceramite crumpled, the bionic components of Karn's gauntlet shattered. The bones of the betrayer's hand ground together and broke. Kratos threw Karn off him, rose to his feet, and stood over the fallen warrior. Karn lay on his back, breathing heavily, his armor shattered, one arm broken, bleeding from a dozen wounds. But he was still grinning. "Do it," Karn gasped. "Take my skull. Send it to Khorne. Let him know that I died fighting the greatest warrior I ever faced." Kratos looked down at him. Then he did something that shocked every World Eater watching. He turned and walked away. "Wait!" Karn roared, struggling to rise. "Face me! Finish it!" Kratos didn't turn back. "You fought with honor. You were not trying to imprison me or control me. You simply wanted combat." He continued walking. "I will not kill you for that." Karn stared at his retreating back, something like confusion crossing his scarred face. No one had ever spared him. In 10,000 years of slaughter, no enemy had ever shown mercy. "What are you?" Karn whispered. Kratos' voice carried across the battlefield. "Someone who is tired of killing." The World Eaters stood paralyzed, uncertain.
Their greatest champion had fallen. The enemy had shown mercy, a concept so alien to them that their rage-broken minds couldn't process it. Then, from orbit, a new voice boomed across all Vox channels, a voice that was not entirely human, touched by the warp, resonating with divine authority. Kratos of Sparta, I am Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt of the Tanith First and Only, and I speak with the authority of the Holy Inquisition. Kratos stopped walking. The Imperium of Man recognizes that you are not chaos, you are not Xenos, you are something else entirely. We have watched you spare civilians. We have seen you fight with honor, even against those who attacked you without provocation. Karn, still lying broken on the ground, listened with something approaching fascination. We offered you parley, safe passage to the northern pole, where our Auspex arrays have detected the dimensional anomaly you seek. We will not attack. We will not impede. We only ask that you leave this world in peace. The transmission ended. Silence stretched across the battlefield. Then Karn began to laugh, a broken, painful sound. They're offering you what you wanted from the beginning, safe passage, permission to leave, all because they finally realize they can't stop you. Kratos stood motionless, considering.
Behind him, 200 World Eaters waited, chain axes silent, their bloodlust momentarily overridden by sheer confusion at this turn of events. Above, both Chaos and Imperial warships held their fire, waiting to see what the Godslayer would choose. Kratos looked north, toward the pole, toward the dimensional resonance that might lead him home. Then he looked back at Karn. "Your God sent you to kill me?" Kratos said. "Will he punish you for failure?" Karn's grin returned. "Oh, undoubtedly. Karn does not forgive weakness." "Then tell your God this. I did not come to your galaxy. I did not choose this war. But if he sends more warriors after me," Kratos' eyes blazed with ancient fire, "I have killed gods before. I can kill gods again." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The World Eaters felt it, a pressure in the air, a weight that spoke of absolute certainty, of promises carved in blood and bone across multiple realities. Karn's laughter died. For the first time in 10,000 years, he felt something other than rage or bloodlust. He felt fear. Not of death. He had long since made peace with dying, but fear of what this being truly represented. The end of gods, the extinction of divinity itself. "Karn should heed that warning," Karn said quietly. Kratos turned and resumed walking north. The World Eaters parted before him like a sea, none daring to attack, their instincts buried beneath millennia of rage and corruption, screaming that this was a predator beyond their understanding. Karn watched him go, one hand pressed to his broken ribs. "Apothecary," he called weakly. An apothecary in modified Medicae armor approached. "My lord?" "Retrieve what's left of Gorechild. Repair what can be repaired." Karn's eye never left Kratos' departing figure. "And send a message to the Skull Throne. Tell Korn, tell him we found a warrior who kills gods for breakfast. Tell him," he paused, "tell him to leave this one alone." The apothecary stared. "My lord, the blood god does not—" "I know what the blood god desires," Karn snapped. "But I also know what even gods fear. And that," he pointed at Kratos, now a distant figure on the horizon, "that is what gods fear. The end of pantheons, the silence after the last prayer, the death of divinity." Aboard the Imperial warship Eternal Vigil, Inquisitor Vex watched the hololith in stunned silence. Kratos had walked through 200 World Eaters without killing a single one after sparing Karn. The Chaos Forces were withdrawing, actually withdrawing, because their champion had told them to stand down. "He could have slaughtered them all," Thessaly said quietly beside him, "but he didn't. Because he doesn't want to fight. He never did. We forced him into it. The Grey Knights attacked first. We created every single battle he's fought on this world." And now, Vex looked at the trajectory line on the hololith. Kratos was 40 kilometers from the northern pole, from the dimensional resonance that would let him leave. Now we let him go, and we pray to the Emperor that he never comes back. On the surface, Kratos walked alone across a dead plain, the twin suns setting behind him, casting his shadow, long and dark, across the battlefield he was leaving behind. He did not look back. He never looked back. The northern pole of Vandros Prime was a wasteland of ice and ancient ruins. Millennia ago, during the dark age of technology, humanity had built something here. A research station, perhaps, or a colony that had reached too far into forbidden sciences. Now only fragments remained, crystalline structures that hummed with residual energy, metal pylons that defied corrosion, and at the center of it all, a circular platform inscribed with mathematics that predated the Imperium itself. Standing on that platform, surrounded by crackling energy that made the air taste of ozone and copper, was the dimensional rift Kratos sought. It wasn't stable. It flickered in and out of existence, a wound in reality, barely held together by whatever ancient technology still functioned in the ruins. Through it, Kratos could see nothing. Not darkness, not light, just the space between dimensions, the void that separated one universe from another. It might lead home. It might lead to oblivion, but it was the only path forward. Kratos stood 200 meters from the platform, surveying the ruins. His divine senses detected no immediate threats, no hidden soldiers, no traps. The Imperium had kept its word, safe passage. But something else was coming. He felt it before he saw it, faith made manifest, belief given form. The psychic pressure of billions of souls crying out to their God, channeled through a single vessel. From the southern sky, a golden rite descended. Saint Celestine, the living saint, came like a falling star. Her armor was white and gold, untouched by corruption, gleaming with inner radiance. Wings of pure faith sprouted from her back, not physical constructs, but manifestations of the Emperor's will, feathers of light that left afterimages on the retina. And in her hands, the ardent blade burned with holy fire, and her presence pushed back the darkness like a lantern in the void.
She was beautiful in the way that cathedrals were beautiful. Terrifying, absolute, undeniable. She landed between Kratos and the dimensional rift, her wings spreading wide, and the temperature rose 20 degrees from the sheer radiance she emitted. "Halt, traveler!" Her voice was layered, her own voice beneath, but carrying with it the whispers of billions of faithful. "I am Celestine, herald of the God Emperor of mankind, she who returns from death, the blessed martyr reborn. You stand at the threshold of departure, but before you leave this realm, you will account for your actions."
Kratos stopped walking. He studied her with the same cold assessment he had given every god and demigod he'd ever faced. "I have accounted for nothing in centuries," he said flatly. "I will not start now. You have killed the Emperor's servants, Grey Knights blessed by his touch, Imperial soldiers sworn to his service." Celestine's blade ignited brighter, the flames white-hot. "The Inquisition may grant you passage, but the Emperor's judgment is not so easily avoided." "Your Emperor is a corpse on a throne," Kratos replied. "I have faced living gods and killed them. I will not be lectured by the puppet of a dead one." The temperature dropped instantly. The light around Celestine flickered, her wings dimming. For a moment, just a moment, the billions of souls channeling through her recoiled at the absolute certainty in Kratos' voice. "You dare blaspheme?" Celestine's voice carried genuine shock. In 10,000 years of resurrection and service, no one had spoken of the Emperor with such casual dismissal. Heretics screamed defiance. Chaos champions mocked him. But this was worse. This was indifference. "I speak truth." Kratos began walking again, directly toward her. "Your Emperor sits upon a throne of lies, fed the souls of your young to sustain his fading life. Your Imperium worships him as salvation while it drowns in its own cruelty. I have seen this story before, in Olympus, in Asgard, gods who demand worship, empires built on suffering. It always ends the same way." "And how does it end?" Celestine demanded, her blade raised. "In ashes," Kratos said. "When mortals finally realize gods are not immortal, just harder to kill." Celestine's wings flared, and she attacked. She moved with speed that transcended physics, not the speed of muscles and servos, but the speed of faith itself. The ardent blade came down in a vertical slash meant to cleave Kratos from crown to groin. The Leviathan axe rose to meet it. When the weapons collided, the shockwave shattered every window in the ruins for a kilometer in every direction. Ice and fire exploded outward, frost magic meeting holy flame. The ground beneath them cracked, and both combatants were thrown backward. Celestine recovered instantly, her wings catching her mid-flight. She hovered 10 meters up, blade blazing, and her voice carried across the battlefield. "You face the Emperor's wrath made flesh. His light cannot be dimmed. His servants cannot be—" Kratos threw the Leviathan axe. It spun through the air, trailing frost, and Celestine barely dodged, the blade passing close enough to shear through 3 of her light feathers. They dissipated like smoke. But while she was focused on the axe, Kratos had closed the distance. He leapt, a jump that carried him 10 meters straight up through sheer divine strength, and caught Celestine by the ankle. Her eyes widened in shock. No one grabbed a living saint. No one could.
The radiance she emitted should have burned mortal flesh to ash. Kratos' hand tightened, his palm scarred from 1,000 divine fires, immune to one more. He yanked her out of the sky. They hit the ground together with enough force to crater the earth. Celestine rolled away, her armor dented for the first time in centuries, and came up with her blade raised defensively. Kratos recalled the Leviathan axe to his hand and advanced. "You cannot win," Celestine said, but for the first time, uncertainty crept into her voice. She had fought greater daemons. She had dueled chaos champions blessed by the dark gods themselves. But this opponent was different. He didn't rely on corruption or dark pacts. He simply was. "I have heard those words before, from Ares, god of war, from Zeus, king of Olympus, from Balder the invulnerable, blessed by Freya herself." His eyes burned with ancient memory. They were all wrong. Celestine channeled more faith, drawing on the psychic reservoir of the faithful across the sector. Her wounds sealed, her armor repaired itself, her blade burned brighter than ever before. "The Emperor protects," she roared, and launched into a devastating combo. 17 strikes in 3 seconds, each one precise, each one carrying the fury of billions of believers. Kratos blocked them all. The sound was like a forge working at triple speed, metal on metal, frost against fire, divine power against divine power. They moved across the battlefield in a blur, neither giving ground, neither accepting defeat. Celestine was faster. Her wings gave her mobility, her faith gave her endurance, her blade never dulled. But Kratos had something she didn't: experience killing gods. He waited, watched, learned her patterns. Ares had been faster. Zeus had hit harder. Balder had been invulnerable. Every god had their strength, and every god had fallen when Kratos found the weakness beneath.
Celestine's weakness was her certainty. She truly believed she couldn't lose. Her faith was absolute. She had died and been resurrected by the Emperor's will dozens of times. Death held no fear for her because she knew she would return. That certainty made her predictable. Kratos saw it. The slight overextension on her thrust attacks, confident that even if she was countered, her divine resilience would save her. The fraction of a second delay as she channeled more faith instead of dodging. The absolute conviction that the Emperor's light would always protect her. He waited for the opening. It came when Celestine attempted her most devastating attack, channeling all her faith into a single, overwhelming strike designed to obliterate daemons and shatter reality itself. "Witness the Emperor's judgment!" The ardent blade ignited with power that could be seen from orbit, a pillar of golden light that reached into the sky. She brought it down with all the force of humanity's collective faith behind it. Kratos didn't block. He sidestepped at the last possible microsecond. The blade struck the ground where he'd been standing and detonated, vaporizing a 50-meter radius of earth and stone. The explosion was visible from the orbiting warships. But Kratos was already moving. While Celestine's blade was buried in the earth, while her guard was down for the fraction of a second it took to recover from that massive expenditure of power,
He drove the Leviathan axe into her chest. The frost magic erupted through her body, flash-freezing organs, blood, bone.
Her wings shattered like ice sculptures. Her armor cracked. Her blades' flame guttered and died. Celestine staggered backward, the axe still embedded in her chest, ice spreading from the wound like crystalline cancer. She looked down at it, then up at Kratos, her eyes, still burning with faith despite the mortal wound, held confusion. "How?" she whispered through frozen lips. "The Emperor should have protected me." "Your Emperor is not here," Kratos said, not unkindly. "And faith is not armor." He yanked the axe free. Celestine collapsed to her knees, her body already beginning the process of dying. She would resurrect, eventually, but not in time to stop him. "You monster," she gasped. "No," Kratos said quietly, looking down at her. "Just someone who has learned that gods fail, that faith is not enough, that worship does not equal protection." He turned toward the dimensional rift. "Your Emperor sits on his throne and watches his servants die in his name. I have no respect for that. I never have." Celestine tried to respond, but the ice had spread to her throat. Her body toppled forward, entombed in frost, her resurrection cycle beginning but too slow to matter. Kratos walked past her fallen form without looking back. Aboard the Eternal Vigil, pandemonium had erupted. "Saint Celestine is down. Repeat, the living saint has fallen." The bridge crew stared at their displays in horror. The unthinkable had happened. A living saint, a being resurrected by the Emperor himself, proof of his divine power, had been defeated by a single warrior. Inquisitor Vex stood frozen, his augmetic eye replaying the footage over and over. The precision, the patience, the absolute certainty with which Kratos had dismantled someone who had survived battles against the worst the galaxy could offer. "He killed a living saint," someone whispered. "How do we even fight that?" "We don't." The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there, supported by two servitors, was Brother Sergeant Maxim of the Ultramarines. He was one of only 3 Space Marines who had survived an earlier engagement with Kratos. Survived because he'd had the sense to order his men to stand down rather than continue a futile assault. "We don't fight it," Maxim repeated. "We let it leave, and we pray it never returns." "But the saint," someone began, "will resurrect within days as she always does. But if we provoke that being again, how many more will die before he finally reaches that portal? How many regiments? How many Astartes? How many saints?" His scarred face was grim. "I have fought for the Emperor for a century and a half. I know when we face an enemy we can defeat, and I know when we face something that will simply grind us to dust if we persist." "Come to try again?" Kratos asked. "No." Korn's voice was tired. "I came to witness. I have spent 10,000 years killing and being killed, serving a god who thirsts for blood without end. But you He gestured at the frozen form of Saint Celestine in the distance. "You killed a manifestation of the enemy god, a living saint. And you did it not because you worship Korn, but because she stood in your way." "Yes, that's pure," Korn said softly. "No corruption, no blessing from dark powers, just skill and will and the absolute refusal to be stopped." He was quiet for a moment. "I envy you." Kratos studied him. "You serve a god who delights in slaughter. I killed the gods I served. We are not the same." "No," Korn agreed, "but perhaps we could have been. In another life, another galaxy." He straightened despite his injuries. "Go, find your home, and know that at least one servant of the dark gods respects what you are." Kratos nodded once, the barest acknowledgement, then turned back to the portal. He stepped toward it, the energies beginning to react to his divine presence, the rift widening slightly, stabilizing as if recognizing something that didn't belong to this dimension. "God Killer," Korn called out. "One last question." Kratos paused. "If you had to, could you kill the Emperor himself, the corpse god on the golden throne?" Kratos didn't turn around, but his answer carried across the frozen plain with absolute certainty. "I have killed greater gods than him. If he stood between me and my home, I would kill him too." The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Every Imperial sensor within 100 kilometers registered a spike in something. Not warp energy, not radiation, something older. The psychic echo of absolute truth, spoken by someone who had made good on that promise before. On the golden throne, 10,000 light years away, the Emperor stirred in his endless vigil. For just a moment, his infinite consciousness turned toward Vandros Prime, and he felt something he had not felt since the Horus Heresy. Recognition of a peer, of something that existed outside his power, of a force that could, theoretically, end him. Then the moment passed, and the Emperor returned to his eternal duty, holding back the darkness, sustaining the Astronomicon, binding reality together. But he remembered. Kratos stepped into the portal. The energies enveloped him, tearing at his divine essence, trying to understand what he was, where he came from, where he belonged. He felt dimensions folding around him, realities shifting, the boundaries between universes screaming as they were forced to accommodate his passage. Pain, worse than Hades, worse than the blades of chaos being burned into his flesh, worse than carrying the weight of the world. This was the pain of not belonging, of being a foreign element forced into a cosmos that rejected him. He endured it, as he had endured everything else. And slowly, gradually, the energies began to recognize a destination. Not his original world, that path was closed, but something else. Somewhere the universe would accept him. A place between places. A realm adjacent to his own. The portal flared once, brilliantly, and then collapsed in on itself with a sound like reality tearing. Kratos was gone. On Vandros Prime, 3 groups stood in different locations, all staring at the empty space where the portal had been. Inquisitor Vex, aboard the Eternal Vigil, surrounded by his subordinates,
all of them silent as they processed what they'd witnessed. Karn the betrayer on the frozen plain, a smile on his ruined face, already composing the report he would send to the Skull Throne, a report that would end with a recommendation that Khorne leave this particular warrior alone. And Saint Celestine, just beginning to stir as her resurrection cycle completed, her first conscious thought a prayer to the Emperor, and her second a memory of eyes that held no fear of gods. The stranger was gone, but the Imperium would never forget.
The dimensional rift had collapsed, but its echo remained, a psychic scar across Vandros Prime that would take centuries to fade. Tech priests from the Adeptus Mechanicus descended upon the ruins, their augmetic sensors recording every data fragment, every residual energy signature, desperate to understand what had just occurred. But understanding would not come easily. The mathematics inscribed on the ancient platform predated even the dark age of technology. The energy readings defied imperial physics, and the being who had activated it, he defied categorization entirely. 3 days after Kratos' departure, Lord Inquisitor Cassius Vex stood in the chamber where Saint Celestine had fallen. The ice remained, unnaturally persistent, refusing to melt despite industrial heaters and thermal charges. It had become a monument, a reminder carved in frost. "The saint has recovered," Inquisitor Thessala reported, approaching with a data slate. "Her physical form is restored, but—" She hesitated. "But?" Vex prompted. "She is changed. She speaks less, prays more, and when asked about the encounter, she says only that she witnessed something the Emperor himself would have respected. She called him a god who chose to be mortal. I don't know what that means." Vex stared at the frozen ground. "It means she understands what we faced. Not a daemon wearing flesh, but something that transcended godhood by rejecting it entirely." He turned to face Thessala. "How many dead in total?" Thessala consulted her data slate, though they both knew the numbers by heart. 273 Imperial Guard, 20 Grey Knights, 12 Space Marines from follow-up engagements, 47 tech adepts who attempted to contain him with mechanized defenses, 1 living saint temporarily killed, 1 Warlord-class Titan crippled, 3 Leman Russ battle tanks destroyed, 1 Baneblade Super Heavy disabled. She paused. "And 0 civilians, my lord. In 6 days of rampage across a heavily populated planet, he killed 0 civilians." That was the detail that haunted Vex most. Every casualty had been a combatant, someone who had attacked first, or stood in his path, or attempted to imprison him. The stranger could have slaughtered millions. Instead, he had carved a surgical path toward his only goal: escape. "The Chaos Forces?" Vex asked. "Withdrawn to the outer system. Karn the Betrayer sent a single astropathic message to the Skull Throne and then departed. Our interceptors couldn't decode it fully, but the key phrase was—" She checked her notes. "Do not pursue." Vex almost laughed. "The champion of Khorne, counseling restraint. What times we live in."
There's more. Thessala's expression darkened. The Mechanicus has analyzed the dimensional rift. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a wound, Something tore through the fabric of reality to reach our universe. The stranger didn't create it. He simply found his way back through it, meaning it could open again. Meaning it was never fully closed. The mechanicist recommends establishing a permanent monitoring station. If another being like him comes through, she didn't need to finish. Vex nodded slowly. Do it. And classify everything under clearance level obsidian. The existence of beings from outside our reality, beings immune to the warp, beings who can kill living saints and walk through our armies like their children, that knowledge would destabilize the Imperium. Understood, my lord. And the official report? Vex was silent for a long moment, weighing his words carefully. Official report. A greater demon of Khorne manifested on Vandros Prime, exploiting a weakened point in reality. Imperial forces, including Saint Celestine and the Ordo Malleus, engaged and banished the entity at significant cost. The dimensional breach has been sealed. The world is cleansed. That's a lie, my lord. Yes, Vex agreed quietly. But it's a necessary one. The truth that we were powerless to stop him, that he could have annihilated us and chose not to, that even our faith made manifest couldn't contain him, that truth would spread fear. Fear breeds doubt. Doubt breeds heresy. He turned to face her fully. Better a glorious victory against impossible odds than an admission that we survived only because he permitted it. Thessala understood, despite her discomfort. Then she left. Alone in the frozen chamber, Vex placed his hand against the ice, still cold enough to burn, still refusing to acknowledge this world's natural laws. Who were you? And what did we truly face? The ice offered no answers.
Drago considered carefully. Define one. Could we have eventually worn him down? Perhaps if we committed the entire chapter and accepted catastrophic losses. But to what end? He was not corrupting, not destroying, simply leaving. Would the Emperor thank us for spending our warriors, his weapon against daemonkind, to stop someone who only wanted to depart? So we let him go. We let him go, Drago confirmed. And we pray that the Imperium never faces his like again, because next time, he gestured to the 20 names carved in adamantium. Next time, he might not be so patient. In the eye of terror, within the brass citadel of Khorne, the blood god bellowed his rage. The skull throne trembled, demons scattered, lesser gods cowered. Khorne had sent his champion to claim a worthy skull, and instead that champion had returned broken, bearing a message of caution. Caution! The word was a roar that shattered reality for a light year in every direction. Caution is for the weak. Khorne knows no restraint. But beneath the rage, buried deep in the ancient consciousness that had once been 8 concepts of mortal emotion, something else stirred. Uncertainty. Kharn had fought for 10,000 years, had never retreated, had never advised withdrawal. If even he counseled against pursuit, the blood god's rage slowly cooled to a simmer. He would remember. Oh, he would remember. And if the god killer ever returned, if he ever set foot in a realm where Khorne held sway, the blood god would personally descend to claim that skull. But for now, there were other wars, other battles, other skulls. The moment of uncertainty passed, buried beneath eternal bloodlust. But it had existed. And in the warp, where thought was reality, and emotion shaped dimensions,
Even a moment of doubt from a chaos god sent ripples across the immaterium. On the golden throne, the emperor stirred again. His consciousness fractured across a million tasks, holding closed the webway breach, powering the Astronomicon, fighting the endless war in the immaterium, coalesced momentarily into singular focus. He had felt the presence of something outside his domain. Not chaos, not Xenos. Something from beyond the galaxy, beyond the warp, beyond the boundaries of his understanding. For 10,000 years, he had been the pinnacle of human evolution, the apex of psychic power, the god-emperor worshipped by trillions. He had foreseen futures, manipulated probabilities, and held an empire together through sheer will. But he had not foreseen this.
Of course, Kratos muttered. The dimensional rift hadn't taken him home. It had taken him to the closest compatible reality. A world similar enough to sustain him, but foreign enough to be unmistakably wrong. He was still lost, but he was no longer in that nightmare galaxy of corpse gods and endless war. That was something. He began walking, his boots crunching through snow that had never known mortal feet. Somewhere in this realm, there would be answers. There would be a way to find the true path home. And if there wasn't, he would make one. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to the galaxy he'd left behind, the soldiers who had died trying to stop him, the golden-armored woman whose faith had not saved her, the scarred warrior who fought for a god of blood but had shown him respect. They had been brave, foolish, but brave. He felt no guilt for their deaths. He had learned long ago that guilt was a luxury he could not afford. But he felt acknowledgement. They had fought according to their beliefs, and he had responded according to his nature. In another life, under different circumstances, some of them might have been worthy allies. But not in that galaxy. Not in a realm ruled by corpse gods and demonic parasites, where faith was weaponized and humanity was ground beneath the wheels of its own empire. He had escaped one pantheon, only to find himself in a galaxy enslaved by another. And he had done what he always did, refused to kneel, refused to serve, and carved his own path through anyone foolish enough to stand in his way. The 41st millennium would remember him, he knew. They would classify him, study him, fear him. They would tell stories of the stranger who walked through their armies and left only questions in his wake. Good. Let them remember that gods were not immortal, that faith was not invincible, that even their vaunted Imperium, with its trillion soldiers and 10,000 years of dominion, could be defied by a single warrior who refused to accept their authority. Let them remember fear. On Vandros Prime, the last of the cleanup crews departed. The frozen memorial remained, a crystalline scar that the Mechanicus had declared spiritually significant and ordered preserved. Pilgrims would come, in time, to see where a living saint had fallen and risen. They would pray there, not knowing the true story, believing the imperial propaganda of a great victory against the demon hordes. In orbit, the warships of the Imperium disengaged and prepared for warp transit, their captains filing reports that would be read by Segmentum Command, redacted, classified, and eventually forgotten beneath layers of bureaucracy. The war against the orcs resumed. Life continued. The Imperium ground forward, as it always did, crushing its enemies beneath treads made of faith and steel and the bodies of the faithful. But in quiet corners, in sealed chambers, in the private thoughts of those who would witness the stranger's passage, a question lingered. What else is out there? If one being could walk through the Imperium's might as if it were parchment, what other forces existed in the cosmos beyond the warp, beyond the material realm, beyond the understanding of even the Emperor? The answer had no answer, but it had been asked. And once a question entered the collective consciousness of the Imperium, it could never be fully silenced. Kratos walked through the shadow forest, alone as he had always been, carrying his weapons and his guilt and his memories like chains around his soul. Behind him, across dimensional barriers and the infinite void, a galaxy continued its eternal war, slightly changed by his passage, but unchanged in its fundamental nature. He had not destroyed WarHammer 40K, but he had proven that it could be survived, that even in the grimdark future where there is only war, a single warrior with the strength to defy gods could carve out his own path. And perhaps that was the only victory that mattered. The ghost of Sparta disappeared into the trees, seeking the next horizon, the next challenge, the next step on an endless journey home. Behind him, the snow fell silently, covering his tracks, erasing all evidence that he had ever been there. But the memory remained. Across two realities, in two very different forms of hell, warriors would remember the stranger who walked between worlds. And they would wonder.
Of course, Kratos muttered. The dimensional rift hadn't taken him home. It had taken him to the closest compatible reality. A world similar enough to sustain him, but foreign enough to be unmistakably wrong. He was still lost, but he was no longer in that nightmare galaxy of corpse gods and endless war. That was something. He began walking, his boots crunching through snow that had never known mortal feet. Somewhere in this realm, there would be answers. There would be a way to find the true path home. And if there wasn't, he would make one. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to the galaxy he'd left behind, the soldiers who had died trying to stop him, the golden-armored woman whose faith had not saved her, the scarred warrior who fought for a god of blood but had shown him respect. They had been brave, foolish, but brave. He felt no guilt for their deaths. He had learned long ago that guilt was a luxury he could not afford. But he felt acknowledgement. They had fought according to their beliefs, and he had responded according to his nature. In another life, under different circumstances, some of them might have been worthy allies, but not in that galaxy. Not in a realm ruled by corpse gods and demonic parasites, where faith was weaponized and humanity was ground beneath the wheels of its own empire. He had escaped one pantheon, only to find himself in a galaxy enslaved by another. And he had done what he always did, refused to kneel, refused to serve, and carved his own path through anyone foolish enough to stand in his way. The 41st millennium would remember him, he knew. They would classify him, study him, fear him. They would tell stories of the stranger who walked through their armies and left only questions in his wake. Good. Let them remember that gods were not immortal, that faith was not invincible, that even their vaunted Imperium, with its 1,000,000,000 soldiers and 10,000 years of dominion, could be defied by a single warrior who refused to accept their authority. Let them remember fear. On Vandros Prime, the last of the cleanup crews departed.
10 years later, in the deepest vaults of Titan, a gathering occurred that would never appear in any Imperial record. Lord Inquisitor Cassius Vex, older now, his augmetics more extensive, his body failing despite the best Medicaid technology, stood before a sealed chamber. With him were 5 others. Inquisitor Thesela of the Ordo Xenos, now a Lord Inquisitor herself. Brother Captain Stern of the Grey Knights, who had studied every fragment of data from the Vandros Prime incident. Fabricator General Zyvan of the Adeptus Mechanicus, whose cogitators had spent a decade analyzing the dimensional mathematics. Canoness Superior Helena of the Adeptus Orataris, representative of the Ecclesiarchy, and Lord Commander Guilliman himself, the returned Primarch who had heard whispers of something that troubled even his gene-engineered intellect. "Show me," Guilliman commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years. Vex activated the hololith. The image that appeared was grainy, reconstructed from a dozen different sensor logs and pict captures, but unmistakable. Kratos, standing amid the bodies of Grey Knights, his eyes empty, his weapons dripping with frost and fire. Guilliman stared at the image for a long moment. As a Primarch, he had been created by the Emperor himself, forged to be beyond human, a demigod in mortal flesh. He had fought Xenos and traitors, had conquered worlds and built empires. But he had never seen anything like this. "You're certain he was not corrupted by chaos?" Guilliman asked. "We subjected every data fragment to the most intensive analysis," Fabricator General Zyvan said, his mechadendrites twitching. "No warp taint, no daimonic signature. His power source was entirely unknown, not psychic, not technological, not biological as we understand it. Simply divine, but a divinity from outside our reality." "He killed 20 Grey Knights," Brother Captain Stern added quietly. "He defeated Saint Celestine in single combat. He walked through our armies as if they were dust, and when Karn the Betrayer fought him, the champion of Khorne, lost, then advised his god not to pursue." Guilliman's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him saw the tightness around his eyes. And his purpose? To leave. That was all he ever wanted. We gave him every opportunity to conquer, to corrupt, to destroy. He ignored them all. He simply wanted to go home. But he didn't return home, Canoness Helena said. Her power armor bore newly carved litanies, prayers against extra-dimensional threats that the Ecclesiarchy had quietly added to its liturgies. "Your reports say the dimensional rift didn't lead to his origin point." "Correct," Zyvan confirmed. "It led to an adjacent reality, a shadow dimension. He may still be trapped there, still searching. Or he may have found another way," Thesela added. "We've detected 3 more dimensional anomalies in the past decade, smaller, unstable. None have produced entities like him, but the barriers between realities are weakening." Guilliman was silent, processing. He had fought in the Great Crusade, had seen the birth of the Imperium, had watched it corrupt and calcify over 10 millennia of absence. He knew the Imperium's strengths, its faith, its numbers, its absolute refusal to surrender.
He also knew its weaknesses. "We barely survived one," Gilliman said finally. "If more come through, beings from dimensions where our advantages mean nothing, where our faith grants no protection, where even our genetic superiority is irrelevant." He didn't finish the thought. "That's why we brought you here, Lord Commander," Vex said. "The Emperor has issued a directive." He produced an adamantium tablet, its surface inscribed with High Gothic so ancient that only a handful in the Imperium could read it. "In the event of extra-dimensional incursion, we are to assess intent before engaging. Not all foreign powers are enemies." Gilliman took the tablet, his eyes scanning the words. He recognized his father's psychic signature embedded in the metal. This order had come from the Golden Throne itself. "He learned," Gilliman said softly. "After 10,000 years of absolute doctrine, my father learned that the universe is larger than even he anticipated." He looked up at the assembled leaders. "This changes everything." "How so, my lord?" Helena asked. "Because it means the Imperium must evolve." Gilliman's voice carried conviction born of bitter experience. "For 10 millennia, we have met every threat with the same response, overwhelming force and absolute faith. It has sustained us, but it nearly destroyed us on Vandross Prime. If we had committed more forces, if we had escalated beyond all reason, how many would have died? And would we have won?" No one answered. They all knew the truth. "We have become rigid. We see only enemies and heretics, chaos and Xenos. We have forgotten that the universe contains mysteries we cannot categorize, powers we cannot comprehend, beings who exist outside our understanding of reality." He turned to face them all. "The stranger from Vandross Prime was not our enemy, but we made him one through our pride and fear." "Are you suggesting we show mercy to threats?" Helena's voice carried warning. "I'm suggesting we show wisdom," Gilliman countered. "Mercy when warranted, destruction when necessary, but above all, assessment, intelligence, recognition that brute force and faith, while powerful, are not the only tools we possess." He placed the tablet down. "My father learned this lesson. Now the Imperium must learn it as well." Stern spoke carefully. "Lord Commander, the Grey Knights exist to fight daemons, entities from beyond our reality. This stranger was also from beyond. How do we distinguish between chaos and other?" "Intent," Gilliman said immediately. "Chaos seeks to corrupt, to destroy, to spread suffering. The stranger sought only to leave. Chaos revels in slaughter. He avoided it when possible. Chaos is antithetical to order. He was order incarnate, brutal but consistent." He paused. "If another dimensional traveler arrives, we watch, we assess, we determine if they are threat or anomaly. Only then do we respond." "The Administratum will resist this," Thesala warned. 10,000 years of doctrine don't change overnight. Then we change them slowly. We establish protocols, create response teams trained in assessment rather than immediate purging. We classify dimensional threats on a spectrum rather than a binary, and we do it quietly, without fanfare, so that by the time the bureaucracy realizes what's happened, the new doctrine is already entrenched." Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. The Imperium could learn, could adapt, could become something more than a mindless war machine grinding toward entropy. "There's one more thing," Zyvan said, his mechadendrites producing a data slate. "Our long-range Auspex arrays have detected anomalies near the Ghoul stars, the region where the stranger's dimensional rift originated. The readings are troubling. It appears the barriers there are permanently weakened. More entities could emerge."
Then we fortify, not with weapons platforms and warships alone, but with monitoring stations, assessment teams, first contact specialists. If more dimensional travelers arrive, we will be ready, not just to fight them, but to understand them. He looked at each person in the chamber, his gene-enhanced presence radiating authority. The stranger from Vandross Prime taught the Imperium a lesson we desperately needed, that we are not invincible, that faith and firepower have limits, and that the universe is stranger and more vast than even 10,000 years of conquest could reveal. His expression hardened. We will honor that lesson, not by becoming weak, but by becoming wise. The Imperium must evolve, or it will stagnate and die. The Emperor protects, Helena said reflexively. Yes, Guilliman agreed, but he also expects us to protect ourselves, and that requires more than blind faith. It requires intelligence, adaptability, and the humility to recognize when we face something beyond our current understanding.
He turned back to the hololith, to the frozen image of Kratos standing amid fallen warriors. "Who were you?" Guilliman whispered, echoing Vex's question from a decade ago. A god who chose mortality? A mortal who achieved godhood? A weapon? A victim? A warning? The image offered no answers, as it never had. "Perhaps we'll never know," Guilliman said, "but we'll remember, and we'll be better for it." In a dimension adjacent to realms both familiar and foreign, in a forest that existed between worlds, Kratos sat by a fire that should not have been possible in this space. He had been walking for 10 years, by his best estimation, though time meant little in shadow realms. He had encountered beings here, echoes of gods he'd killed, fragments of realities he'd destroyed, ghosts of civilizations that had never quite existed. None had stopped him. He was close now. He could feel it in his bones, in the spark of divinity that he'd never quite extinguished despite everything. The true path home was near, not to Midgard, not to Greece, but to something in between, a place where he could finally rest, or at least stop running. He thought about the galaxy he'd left behind, that nightmare realm of corpse gods and demon worship, of endless war and industrial-scale slaughter. Part of him wondered if he should have stayed, if he should have torn down their false emperor and shattered their corrupt system. But that wasn't his war. Not anymore. He had destroyed pantheons. He had ended ages. He had killed gods and toppled empires. And every time, it had solved nothing. New gods rose, new empires replaced the old. The cycle never ended. So he had walked away. Let them have their war. Let them worship their corpse god. Let them grind themselves to dust in the machinery of their own faith. He was done being an agent of destruction. Now he just wanted to go home. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, something howled. A sound that existed between dimensions, neither quite animal, nor demon, nor any defined thing. Kratos drew the Leviathan axe and waited. Whatever came, he would face it, as he had faced everything else. And eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe in another decade, maybe in another century, he would find the true path home. He was patient. He had learned patience in Hades, in Helheim, in all the underworlds he'd walked through and out of. He could wait. Back in the 41st millennium, the Imperium continued its eternal war. Worlds burned, heroes fell, saints rose. The great enemy pressed against reality's barriers. Xenos threatened from without. Heretics rotted from within. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Because now, buried in the deepest vaults, encoded in the most secret protocols, enshrined in directives that would take centuries to fully implement, was a new truth. The Imperium was not invincible. The universe was stranger than they had imagined. And somewhere out there, beyond the warp, beyond the material realm, beyond all their maps and understanding, existed forces that answered to no god and bowed to no empire. The stranger had walked among them for 6 days. He had killed hundreds. He had spared millions. He had defeated a living saint. And then he had left, asking nothing, taking nothing, changing everything. The Imperium called it a demon attack and moved on. But those who knew, those who had truly witnessed what occurred on Vandros Prime, would carry that knowledge like a scar, a reminder that humanity's dominion was not absolute, that the Emperor's light did not reach everywhere, that faith, while powerful, was not invincible. And perhaps in a dark universe that had forgotten how to evolve, that was the greatest gift the stranger could have given them. The knowledge that they were not the apex of creation, the humility to recognize limits, the wisdom to know that not every unknown was an enemy. The Imperium would take centuries to truly learn these lessons. Bureaucracy moved slowly. Doctrine changed like continental drift. But the seeds had been planted. And somewhere, in the quiet moments between battles, in the private thoughts of inquisitors and primarchs, and even the Emperor himself, a question lingered. What else is out there? It was a terrifying question. It was a liberating question.
And it was a question that would shape the Imperium's next 10,000 years, whether they realized it or not. Because Kratos had not destroyed WarHammer 40K. He had done something far more dangerous. He had proven that it could be survived. That even the grimdark future's absolute certainty could be challenged. That gods could bleed and empires could be defied, and warriors could walk their own path regardless of the darkness around them. The 41st millennium would never be the same. And in the endless void between dimensions, the ghost of Sparta walked on, seeking home, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by 6 days of his presence. The Emperor protects. But even the Emperor had learned that some things exist beyond protection, beyond prediction, beyond understanding. And that, perhaps, was the most important lesson of all.